All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Thank you so much for joining us for the last of the TAGG Teacher Certification Series. My name is Belkis-Praslin. I'm the TAGG coordinator and a doctoral student here at the University of Oklahoma. And then we also have Fanee Webster joining us. Fanee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, all. My name is Fanee Webster. I am a first-year doc student at OU in the Zarrow Center. Really excited to be with you guys today. I'm not very special, so that's all I got.
Thank you, Fanee. So today's presentation, I think, will actually come out to be pretty short because what I have to recommend to you all requires more of a discussion and less of like procedural how-tos. And so, and we also wanted to share some resources that might help in connecting the TAGG results to the general education curriculum standards, which is the topic for today. So with that being said, in the chat, you should have access to the webinar presentation for today. If you don't, you can also get the materials using this QR code here on the screen. We don't have too many QR codes this time around, I promise. But if they do happen to pop up during the presentation today, there will also be a short URL that you can access the documents in at the bottom of each one. Okay, so just some quick little housekeeping information. If you are attending today's webinar, which you are all here, and I'm very happy to see you all, we will have a survey at the end of today's presentation where you can log your attendance and give us a little bit of feedback, which helps us a lot. And with that information, we plan the future webinars in the next series. So this year, I'd like to think of it as our pilot year. And we kind of figured out what works and what teachers might need a little bit more than others or in other areas. And so we'll use that information for future webinars. And then you will also receive an immediate certificate for today's attendance. Now, if you've attended all 4, including today's webinar, you will receive a TAGG Certified Teacher certificate, indicating that you've attended all 4, that you are like an expert in how to use the TAGG and also how to get the most out of your use of the TAGG. And there will also be a link for that at the end. If you were, you happen to miss any of the first 3 or all of the first 3, that's perfectly fine. We completely understand that educators are, we completely understand that educators and teachers are just experiencing lots of different things this year. And I'm sorry, I asked some people to unmute and I meant to press mute for ignore me. Okay, so with that being said, there are definitely ways to catch up and to make sure you can get your certificate to be a TAGG certified teacher. So we can go ahead and get started or just jump right into the material. Just to make sure we're on the same page, I'm going to do the quickest background information you've ever received on standards, because I also recognize that you have all been teachers in the field, and so you are familiar with standards. So I don't feel the need to explain to you exactly what they are specifically. But then I'm going to show you just really quickly how to connect a Common Core standard, because that's what is reported in the TAGG, to your state standards, which you might also very well know how to do. And then we're going to go over the TAGG results and connecting those to academic standards and some resources to help in that process. And then we'll just finish right off with the certificates. So like I said, might be pretty short today, but it's okay. We never mind a short webinar. It's a Friday. So just some really quick background. The purpose of standards, that I don't know that the purpose gets shared a lot with educators so much as that you are told to teach to standards, or the standards need to be taught somewhere within your content or your courses. And so just, bottom ground information, they're supposed to be to articulate the rigorous grade level expectations for all students. When they say all students, they generally mean all students in the general education curriculum. They don't always include students who are not in that curriculum path, unfortunately. But with students with disabilities who are participating in the general education curriculum, they are supposed to be held to the exact same standards. And we know that that is true in a lot of sense, but there's also a need to support students with disabilities in meeting those standards. We do this through a multitude of ways, and specifically because IDA tells us to. But that information is just incredibly important to keep in mind sometimes when it comes to standards, because I think that tends to get lost. Some just really quick information. So in 2018 to 19, it's the latest data we have, there's 7.1 million students with disabilities in the United States under IDEA. And then 2.3 million of those 7 million students are receiving the or have the disability category of specific learning disability. It's followed by speech language impairment, and then kind of goes back and forth a little bit on autism and ED and whatever rankings there are after that. But that to be said, that the majority of students under IDEA receive services within the general education environment most of the day or most of their time, meaning 80% or more of their school day. And that's 64% of all students with disabilities. So whatever 64% of 7.1 million is. And so a lot of the times when people outside of special education think about providing services or teaching to standards, they are not considering that the majority of our students are in the classroom with everyone else in the school building. And so kind of this like divergent idea of teaching standards or making sure students are meeting markers and standards is not always something considered. And so I just wanted to put it out there. We are considering it within the realm of transition. We do think about that sometimes, along with all the other things we think about. So special educators of students in the gen ed curriculum are among the many other responsibilities you have to do. And trust me, I know that there's so many things. Transition is just added onto the list of things, right? So assessing transition and teaching transition and tracking transition skills. And I apologize, let me close out that email. It's just an extra thing on your list of things to do in a school year or for every single one of your students, and it's cumbersome. And so time is also the thing that kind of universally special education teachers and educators say is the biggest barrier to providing any kind of transition services to students. And it's, I think, completely understandable, especially given that we know that most students are in the gen ed environment, and taking them out consistently to teach transition, to assess transition, to do all these other things regarding transition, no matter how important it is also not necessarily the most realistic option that we have in schools today. And so today I want to be able to show you all how we can merge parts of the transition realm and TAGG into the general education environment. It does require a couple of different things that may be a little bit more idealistic than we would like, but there technically are ways to do it, and hopefully we can share those with you all today. So first, we're going to look into connecting Common Core standards to your state standards. And the majority of states in the country are using Common Core standards. Now, is anybody here? Well, I know Texas doesn't, and Oklahoma technically doesn't. Anybody here from a state that also does not use Common Core? You type it in chat, you can unmute. Virginia, yep, Virginia, I believe has never, or they didn't repealed. Okay, so what I wanted to show you, Florida is one of these states that I use as an example that once did Common Core, but then didn't do it after the fact, and that's fine, that happens to a lot of states. Basically, if you pick out your state standard and it kind of matches something within the transition goal realm that you're working on with your students or you're going to include in the IEP, there is very easily a way to connect it to the Common Core standard or vice versa. The language in standards is usually very vague, right? If you take a look at them long enough, you're like, yeah, you could write an argument, and writing an argument encompasses a lot of different places. And so the Common Core standard listed there is to write arguments to support claims. And then I just did a quick Google search and I found the matching one for Florida. Write arguments to support claims, even though Florida is not one of these states that has Common Core as their standards. And so I know that a lot of you know how to do this already, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that it's not a far leap from a Common Core standard to any other standard that you may be using. And so I just wanted to make sure that that point came across, just in case that you are not using a Common Core standard, that there is 100% a matching one we could find for you if you needed. So I wanted to do this example by a scenario because I thought the best way to share what to do or my advice to do would be to give you all a scenario. So in our scenario, we have a teacher, special educator, Mr. Leahy, who administered the tag to a student, Brandon. And the goals listed on the tag results are based off Brandon's greatest areas of need.
Kevin, I got it.
Oh. That's good. Sorry. I do my best to try to mute people. So Mr. Leahy and Brandon, teacher and student. So Brandon is in the general education environment all day long or in the school day, and Mr. Leahy is not with Brandon all day or has kind of spaces to work with Brandon throughout the day. And he's not sure when he could teach these transition skills to a student. And this is just an example of what the tag results look like once you've completed them. If you select that Common Core, and I'll show you guys how to do it if you don't have it. If you selected Common Core when you registered your account, every goal will have matching Common Core standards. Now, the majority of them tend to be in the ELA realm of the English literature realm, but many are also related to math, and they'll tell you which ones are related. So seeing that each tag goal provided is related to a Common Core standard, the teacher, Mr. Leahy, would review the areas of needs with Brandon's general education teachers. Now, I know that this is also a very ideal situation because we don't tend to do this with our general education teachers, but I am also a big believer in teaching things that should happen. And so this should happen. We should be sharing these results with the general education teachers, particularly when our students are solely in that environment or mostly in that environment. And the same way that you get the reports of how they did in their state tests, consider this the same. You're just sharing that report over with the other educators. And so in the most ideal situation, the ELA teacher and Mr. Leahy, the special education teacher, will look at this together and say, hey, I actually teach this Common Core 12.2b. It's one of the units I'll teach in the semester, or I can incorporate it pretty easily, even if I haven't done it yet, because it goes along with things that we do in class. And so this, again, the most ideal situation. The other more realistic situation is the special educator will have to go to the ELA teacher and say, hey, are you teaching this at any point this year? And then if so, I need to collaborate with you so we can track this skill for my student, Brandon, or for our student, Brandon, which is also a feasible way to do this. So ideally, both teachers decide that, yes, that standard can be taught within that general education curriculum, embedded into their course. And so instead of an information activity sheet that all students in the class have to do, Brandon gets a personalized sheet that meets the standard, the class grade or objective, and also the transition area. So it's kind of crossing off a couple different things off the list. And I realize that this is a little bit more ideal than we expect, but doesn't mean we can't do it. Ideal is always the goal. So let me move us forward. So our original tag goal, I took the one that corresponded to that Common Core standard I showed you earlier, was after instruction, the student will verbally describe at least one transition goal, so on and so forth. We write transition goals in the tag to be appropriate to the tag. They're not necessarily customized for your student. So we really do stress the fact that our goals are IDEA compliant, they're considered SMART goals, but you should, as educators, customize these goals and make sure that they are appropriate to your student, and feel free to do with them what needs to be done to meet the student's unique environment and skills and abilities. And so in the scenario where Mr. Leahy and the general education teacher have collaborated and decided this is something that can be done within the general education environment, the goal was constructed a little bit differently. So after instruction on the selecting and topic, and that's the part that comes directly from the Common Core, Brandon will describe in writing, because it's an ELA class, and that's probably the work that they're doing in the ELA class, at least one transition goal, and that remained from the tag. And so this is the exact same goal. So that very top part, on selecting the most significant, that is where our Common Core standard kind of comes in. Even if your IEP document in your state doesn't allow you to choose a standard related to a transition goal, it could be noted kind of somewhere within that transition plan or in the IEP meeting notes that there is a relation to Common Core, meaning that we are really working on that student's academic skills, which would be appropriate because our student is in the general education environment. And that's kind of how you look at it whole picture. So we are attacking a couple different things at once. And then I am also an advocate completely for changing goals if you're including them in the gen ed setting to meet the gen ed setting. So if our students are working on writing and they're in ELA traditional general ed environments, then that should be described in the goal. A lot of the times in the TAGG goals, you will see that we say describe, identify, but not necessarily how. That needs to be a little bit more specific. And so I was always taught to write with like action verbs. So writing, that's a thing we know that he could do. That's what I would recommend, is to put those action words in there to really describe what the student's supposed to be doing and how they would be assessed. So some themes in that scenario, and I think we are going to be very fast today. Some themes in that scenario is there has to be some kind of collaboration between teachers. We know this 100%. And we also know that this is probably one of the harder things to do in high school or middle school environments, especially when your students are in many courses with many teachers. It can be difficult to do, but it's also one of the indicators of how well IEPs are, like students progress in their IEPs when there is collaboration amongst everyone the student is working with in their school day or their school year. So collaboration is very important. A revision of goals. Like I said, we write our goals to be IDA compliant. We say that you can cut and paste them, but revising them, making sure that they fit not just the student, but the environment, and more ideally can be done in a multitude of settings, and not necessarily has to be done one-on-one every time you pull a student out of class, would be the most ideal for students in our gen ed environment. As possible. It's also great to be able to work with them one-on-one, but time is the bigger constraint in the school day, especially for educators with caseloads of like 40 kids and you're trying to do everything at once. And so accommodated and modified assignments within the gen ed environment are recommended. Of course, we have to make sure that that still meets the basic gen ed requirements, as if all students are supposed to be doing an activity sheet, then our student also needs to do the activity sheet. It means that we can accommodate it or maybe modify it specifically to meet some of the transition markers, but our student is still meeting that standard of finding the right ideas and describing them in writing and being graded in the same manner that everyone else is graded, if only their topic is a little bit different. So what does Brandon need to complete this task? So what does the student, is another concern that we have to think about, need to complete this modified alternate task in his classroom if he doesn't have his special education teacher with him at all times? And this is also just some extra collaboration. He would need a copy of his IEP, or at least the transition plan, to know what his goals are, which is another big thing that we don't tend to tell our students what goals we put in their IEP at the end. We've written really great ones, and we know that they come from what the student wants and their student's assessment, but the actual, this is the final goal that we all said you're working on. There's like a big disconnect. The students don't tend to know what that goal is, even though it's aligned with what they wanted or, you know, reflective of their work and their abilities. It's something that just needs to get shared a little bit more. So I advocate for that as well. And then Brandon's own reflection on past transition related work, especially when students are in general education setting most or all of their school day, they are not necessarily thinking of some of the skills they're working on as transition related. And so kind of making sure that he knows, hey, this assignment is for your ELA class, but it is also a transition assignment for your IEP. And this way we can start working on some of these goals. It's a lot of communication with students. And I know depending on the student's age, it's something that needs to be treaded on a little bit lightly, or we want to really focus on, especially when they're getting older, but bringing the student in on the piece of their own learning and their own progress in the IEP, especially as students are getting older, is incredibly important. And so we want to make sure that when we are doing this kind of work of collaborating and incorporating our special education transition needs into other education environments, that we are being clear with not just the other educators, but the student as well, of what is supposed to be happening and what is happening. So I won't walk you through a bunch of other scenarios, but I did want to ask you all if you can unmute, we can all kind of talk about it kind of quickly. So I showed you an ELA example. Now I want you to look at a math example. A TAGG goal that we have that has a related math standard. It's math practice, I think 6 is what the P stands for. So the goal is following math instruction over missed test items. The student will describe the process to obtain the correct answer and correct their work with 90% accuracy by the end of the unit. So like I said, very vague kind of goal. This is a goal that could be done in absolutely any math course or math related course. And then the matching Common Core standard is attend to precision. Mathematically proficient students will communicate precisely to others and use clear definitions in discussing their own reasoning. So very much aligned. Why did you get something wrong? And then how do you fix it? Process to obtain a correct answer. So the question would be, how do we teach this TAGG transition skill, an identified area of need, into math courses? How can we relate those things together? Another question to consider, how can special educators support the transition skill for students in the gen ed setting? Same question, different way to look at it. I'm usually fine with wait time, but I will wait for like 30 minutes normally, but I will not push you all to wait today. Essentially, it's a lot of the same thing. We have to use the collaboration. And this is one of the goals that can really easily be done within a math course, right? If students are going over their test responses in class, then we want to make sure that we are tracking them in some form, that they are also understanding why they got something right or wrong, and then reasoning that information. And that tracking could be honestly pretty informal. Got some responses. So Lakeisha Franklin, time and budgeting management. Yeah, 100%. This would be a great goal to include in any kind of, what are those courses called? The home ec courses, or like an economics course where you do some kind of budgeting information. Great place to start putting this stuff in, and really to specific transition skills. Courtney Gregory, communicating their answer and how they arrived at the answer, walking through each step. Exactly, those are great. You can make that into the easiest rubric ever for a transition skill. Did the student communicate their answer? Yes. Did the student walk through the process? Yes, the student did. And then the student corrected their responses perfectly. Yes, they did. And that's a really great, easy way to track that transition skill and have it done inside the gen ed environment. Exposure to self-determination, goal check-ins. Yes, wonderful. You guys have that. Just a really quick other one. A lot of the ELA goals fit right into history and social studies curriculum. And we also, the SL, I believe, stands for speaking language for the Common Core. But for when you are trying to teach disability awareness and in students, it's a kind of a touchy area, but doing it within a different course in the students' scheduling or day can actually be a really great way to incorporate this and get them a good grade for doing some extra work or some different work. So one of the goals in the TAGG is that the student will write a brief history of special education and include situations where academic help may be needed. And so this is a really great way for them to understand their own place in special education and what it is, even though they may have been in that setting for the majority of their school life. And then identify areas that they believe accommodations will be needed. And this would be a great place for them to reflect on their own disability needs and awareness. And so what the matching ELA standard would be to integrate multiple sources of information through diverse media. And what a great place to do that other than a history or social studies course. You can also do it, of course, in an ELA course, but if an assignment within that history or social studies course is to write or summarize the history of any topic that the class is going over, perhaps a collaboration between the special educator and that history teacher could be instead of any topic, can we do a topic on special education for our student Brandon? Because Brandon needs to work on this goal anyways, and we can kind of do it all at once, and he can still get a grade for your class. You grade him however you need to, but I'll make sure to have my own tracking system that he's done it. And so the collaboration piece is incredibly important, but it really can be done within different settings in the school. So like I mentioned earlier, if you have done a tag and you don't see those Common Core standards at the side of your tag, do not worry, there's a really easy way to fix that. Once you log into your account, you'll have those options up top, and you're going to want to hit account settings. And then in that account settings page, you're just going to want to make sure that it says Common Core enabled. Of course, you don't have to, but if you wanted to, and now that we know how to match our Common Core to whatever our state is using, then we can easily make some connections and incorporate that into our students' needs. All right, so we're just going to go over some resources quickly, or Fanee is going to go over them for us. And Fanee, you just tell me when you want me to turn the slide.
All righty. The first resource we're going to talk about is Tying the Knot, which is kind of self-explanatory on the paper, but what it really does is marry ELA objectives and those transition competencies. So it is aligned with the Oklahoma ELA, as well as with research identified skills students need to obtain employment or participate in further education after high school. It can be used to generate additional annual transition goals using those core standards. So it's a really cool thing, especially for your ELA peeps out there, to use the resources it has. The activities and annual transition goals are arranged on a continuum to accommodate students with the least support needs to the most support needs. And that's kind of the scale you get on this. So for instance, on the screen right now, you have a sample activity, and it kind of goes from most complex to least complex, as well as a sample transition goal for this one. So it really lets you scaffold it and really personalize it to whatever support needs your kiddo has. The examples can be modified even more to better suit the students you teach. And then, of course, everything that we do, we want to be as individualized as possible. Belkis, did you want to add anything else about that scale?
No, but so one little thing to add, the activities, there's like a number of activities and goals attached to the activities that can be used within the transition plan in the IEP. And they're really great. And a lot of the times, like the first one here, that each student in the class will take turn talking about accommodations. We know that this is not necessarily something that can be done in every single class, but in classes where discussion like this is possible, then these are great activities to kind of take place in. And there are also other options in the document, the Tying the Knot. The only thing I will add on, in addition to that, is that we are currently doing some changes to our TAGG, our Zarrow Center website. And so this morning I had some issues getting the Tying the Knot. It should be fixed, but if you have any problems, you just let me know and I'll make sure you have it. Okay, sorry about that, Fanee.
No, I just wanted to make sure it all got said. Next up is the Me curriculum. And it was developed to increase self-determination skills. So those skills, your self-advocacy, self-awareness. We know that through research that it has the potential to increase successful secondary and post-secondary outcomes for students with disabilities. Yeah, I was fixing to say. The unit covers, it does do the Common Core state standards, and the lesson plans are arranged by unit one at a time. And on the Zarrow Center website, if it's applicable, they do have the entire PDF file, which is like 360 some odd pages, but it just kind of gives you everything in one spot. If you didn't want it all like that, there are individual links that you can kind of click on to get lessons or any supplemental activities. What else about it? It has an entire scope and sequence, all 10 lessons. They really do scaffold onto each other and go straight. They go from helping kiddos know more about their disability all the way to them making a portfolio of just different resources that they collect throughout the time of the span of the curriculum to use out in the real world. One great thing I really, really love about it is that it already comes with modified assignments. So every assignment on there also has a modified version. Not to mention this incredible free resource. Also, it comes in the Word document. So if it needs to be modified even further or you want to make changes to that, it's very, very easy to do. Did I leave anything out?
No, so we've talked about the Me kind of multiple times, and I promise you we're not trying to like push it onto you, but it does connect to Common Core standards, and there are also Oklahoma Pass standards, which again, one and the other, you can make a really easy jump. But we wanted to make sure that that information was known to you all. And as well, that there are many activities within the Me that have absolutely nothing to do with disability. And so they are appropriate for all students because all students could deal with some self-awareness and self-determination skills.
Absolutely. If you're from Texas, there is a really great resource, if you guys don't know. And the TEAGs are actually, you can get them on your phone. I know when I taught in Texas, I used it quite a bit just to kind of get some verbiage and some wording down if I was looking for if I was writing a goal for a specific subject, especially if I wasn't well versed in that subject. It was definitely something, it was kind of my go-to thing. It's very, very easy to use, breaks everything down by subject, area, grade, and then of course, standards. So it's also a really cool tool to use. I will say one more thing about the Me. Whether you're a brand new teacher or a seasoned teacher, there's something for you. If you're brand new, but you know how important this is and you want to start out great, they do such a great job with the Me curriculum and even giving you, what's the word I'm looking for? Scripts. So like down to what you should say, they give you the discussion topics that you need. It is a very detailed lesson plan. And for your teachers that have been doing it for a while, there's still something to get from that as well. So it really does meet a range of needs.
All right. So like I said, today was a short one, which I am all about on a Friday. Before we get into the surveys, which are coming up in just a second, I wanted to make sure that you all had our contact information, especially since this is our last webinar of the whole series. If you have any issues or have any questions about the TAGG or resources, you can always email us at TAGG, TAGG @ou.edu. It's me, you will be talking to me. And if you email the Zarrow Center in general, it's a lot of the different people who work here at the Zarrow Center who look at that email, but we are all equipped and able to help you. We're not a very large operation, so I wanted to make sure you had that information. We also are available by phone, but just a quick note that we are like half campus, half not. So sometimes email is a little bit easier.
Thank you for joining the 4-part webinar series for the TAGG teacher certification. On the left here, you'll see a QR code and a short URL to access the certificate number 4 for this webinar. And if you have watched or attended all 4 of the TAGG certification videos and series, you can use the QR code on the right and the short URL if needed to access the final TAGG teacher certificate. For the TAGG teacher certification, the QR code on the right, I will be periodically checking and validating to make sure that you have completed and watched all 4. And if you don't hear back within a week of completing the form, please email us at TAGG, TAGG @ou.edu so I can get that certificate to you. Thank you again for watching. Please reach out if you have any questions.